And with insignificant comes just unlimited freedom when you don't have to worry so much about what you think about things, and it doesn't really matter in the big scale. And I think glacial time has a way of highlighting that, and so that was a sort of that cumulative effect of hiking within those parameters, and how it just sort of all melted away. And that's the one that sticks with me the strongest.
Episode 297, Luke Kloberdanz talks about through hiking the Ice Age National Scenic Trail. You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast, brought to you by 180 Tech. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors, or to keep you moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Curt Linville.
Hi, friends. Thank you again for listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast today. I have a neat show for you about a lesser-known through hiking trail, and I'm excited to learn a lot more about this one because I'll be honest, I didn't know much about it, and so I'm going to be learning right along with you folks today. The trail is the Ice Age Trail. You don't have to go back in time to do this, but it does follow the route that was heavily landscaped by the last Ice Age, which is so cool. So, how many of you know what the Ice Age Trail is? Do you know where it is? Do you know anything about it? Well, if not, today's show is going to fill you in. It's a really cool option for a through hike that's not quite as big as the Appalachian Trail or the Continental Divide Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, but yet it's still substantial. There's about 1,200 miles of trail there that you can do. And today I have with us Luke Kloberdanz, who is the full-time Director of Outreach and Education for the Ice Age Trail Alliance. So who better to have here to tell us about the Ice Age Trail than Luke? Luke, thank you very much for joining the Adventure Sports Podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here, Curt.
That's awesome, man. I'm so excited to talk about this trail just because it's one that I know so little about. So it's going to be a lot of fun. For starters, though, tell people where the trail is. We gave them that teaser. We'll give them at least that much.
All right. Well, the trail is located in Wisconsin. And if you're not familiar with where Wisconsin is, it's in the upper Midwest and on the northern shore of the state is Lake Superior, and on the eastern side we have Lake Michigan, and then that little piece of the upper peninsula of Michigan State covers the other side in between those two lakes, and so it's lake country and found in the upper Midwest.
Well, I was kind of laughing before we started recording here. I don't know why it is, but it seems to me that people may not know Wisconsin as well as they know other states. And I don't know why that is, but I think it's probably true. So for those of us who need to know more about Wisconsin, fill us in. What is Wisconsin like?
Oh, well, it's home to the Green Bay Packers. I mean, let's be, first right out of the gate with that one. But no, Wisconsin it's a really diverse state in terms of landscape and certainly geology, and that is our story. But there's when you go across the northern part of the state, it's very remote and very rugged woods, deep woods of the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest System. But on the southern half, you really get a lot of diversity in terms of prairies and big old oak savannas and grand views of our glacial landscape. And as you mentioned, it was carved out by the last glacial advance. And what Wisconsin really cherishes is that the fact that we're home to some of the highest density of those glacial features found anywhere in the world. So that's really what the trail traverses and what long distance hikers can experience as they're going along are these, we don't have giant mountains, but we have got lots of ups and downs and twists and turns along the way through glacial landscape. It's home also to some of the bigger cities, I guess, in our area would be Milwaukee, certainly Madison, and we've got Chicago with less than an hour's drive from the trail, and the Twin Cities are also less than an hour drive from the nearest trailhead. But outside of that, you can plan on a classic Friday night fish fry at just about any bar or restaurant, and also home to some great craft beers long before it was cool to be home to craft beers.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And what I like about this, too, you think about it, the Appalachian Trail, we got the Appalachian Mountains. The Continental Divide Trail, that's the tall one, right? You're going through the heart of the Rockies. And then the Pacific Crest Trail, you're going through the Sierra Nevadas, you're going through the Cascades. Those are all big mountain trails. Wisconsin here, we're not talking about a big mountain trail, but like you said, there are lots of ups and downs and variety in the landscape. Does that make it an easier trail, or would you say not necessarily?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. So yes, I would say, physically in terms of gain, and it's very, very easy in that sense. So, you can move through the landscape pretty freely. You're not chugging up long mountain traverses, but I think what separates it a little bit is some of that, ecosystem that's particularly, I think, in the north, where we have very, very few volunteers that help maintain and build the trail, and it can be a test for a lot of people. There's at any given time we can have a beaver dam just flood a whole section of trail, to blowdowns, to anything that we're just not able to get to as quickly as we might like. But we're working on changing our maintenance pattern there. But it's really something that we're proud of, the different experience levels, the people that can use this trail. I think what the push in a lot of ways isn't as much physical as it is mental, since you aren't very likely to see many other backpackers on the trail if on a through hike. You'll see them in certainly big parks or well-known areas like the Kettle Moraine State Forest. But once you hit the northern half, you're very likely to be the only one out there, backpacker or otherwise, that you'll see for days on end.
So a lot more solitude than some of the major trails that are more popular these days.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a permitting process, and we have 150 people since 1958 have done the whole trail. We call them 1,000-milers, and whether it's a section hike or a through hike, that's where it sits right now. And so, yeah, you will see day hikers. Certainly, the trail goes near Milwaukee and Madison, and you'll see people out on their evening run or jog or walking the dog or whatever. But as you progress away from some of those population centers, you don't see many people at all. So yeah, it's mentally challenging that way, and not quite as many people, not the strong social network that you see in some of those other trail systems.
Right. Well, I want to come back to more talk about the Ice Age Trail here in a little bit, but I want to get your backstory first. So,
sure.
How did you get started in backpacking? What drew you into it?
Well, I mean, like a lot of people, it probably just, being a kid and going out with my family. And, it was kind of while we didn't go on long backpacking trips, we go camping and we hiked all the time. And it was really just was like how I grew up. It was a way of life. And when I moved to Wisconsin, from Minnesota, I started looking for that, what's my outlet? And I didn't, like a lot of people that are listening to the show today, I didn't know about the Ice Age Trail. And so I started Googling backpacking in Wisconsin. And so here I found this trail and started just walking it and getting out and finding that place for my release, if you will, the way to disconnect, to reconnect with myself. And so, yeah, through my youth, and then with the Ice Age Trail, just started walking it and seeing what it was all about and becoming more interested, and going on guided hikes and having people talk about the glacial geology was just fascinating to me. I always considered like a hill just sort of was there. It never had a way of being created. And when you think about that, it changes your outlook on the landscape for sure.
I know that part of Wisconsin, probably all of Wisconsin, was completely covered, but the part of Wisconsin to the north especially had to be under a lot of ice. Do you know how
Yeah.
thick the glaciers were at the time?
About a mile thick sheet of ice that came through the state, and it didn't cover the entire state. The southwest corner of Wisconsin is called the driftless area, and because there was lack of a drift, and that part, what the trail itself follows, is the furthest extent of the last glacial advance. So, if you think about that sheet of ice, those cold icy fingers coming down from the north and scouring the land, if you look at the route of the trail on a map, you'll see that was where the last advance stopped. So that's where what we follow. So we see a lot of moraines and a lot of drumlins and eskers and glacial features along that route because of that finishing spot of the last glacial advance.
Oh, that's fun. So a moraine is where a glacier has pushed up a big pile of sediment, rocks and other things, and often that moraine kind of has layers and waves in it where it pushes and recedes and pushes and recedes and pushes and recedes. So that means you're going to have some really interesting hilly landscape with all kinds of rocks and stuff kind of jumbled together and mixed in together, I'd bet.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And so there'd be one moraine would come down and then would recede, and then another moraine would come down and land on top of that one, or the rock that it was pushed up by the previous one. So yeah, we see a lot of really, really interesting landforms. Another example is an esker where there was this raging river that was flowing underneath the ice, and when the ice receded and that river dried up, the debris that river was carrying settles on the landscape. And so in the woods, and I'm thinking of several in the north right now where there's this long sinuous ridge that just winds through the woods, and we'll try to put the trail on that or next to it. But when you're hiking on an esker, you have a steep drop off of 200 feet or so on either end of you, and you're walking on this river, this dried up river through the woods. It really changes your perspective rather than being at that trunk level of, say, those deep hemlock woods. Now you're floating through or near the top of them, and changes your perspective dramatically.
You're selling me on it. One of my favorite places to backpack is where there are moraines and stuff like that, because I'm not really a rock hound. I'm not a geologist, but I really enjoy looking at the variety of rocks and trying to pick out, this is basalt and that came from a volcano, and this is metamorphic, that came from being underground for a long time and twisted and mixed, and then this is, there's some sedimentary thrown in here too, and being able to look at all the different stuff and see some of them are just beautiful. So
that is putting it mildly in some cases, because we have a wide variety of rocks, and a lot of these erratics, these giant boulders that were brought down, carried from Canada, and they're found scattered in these Wisconsin fields and forests, but they hail from Canada. And when I'm talking the type of rock that farmers farm around, they can't move, and seeing those and imagining what that force was that brought them here. I'm not a rock hound either, but hearing people talk about the forces that acted on this land and really changed a lot of what we have here. We did have mountain ranges in Wisconsin, but the long-term ice and pushing and scouring the land wore them down to what we have today, and that erosion effect really changed this landscape considerably. And so, a whole new appreciation for geology. I'm not a geologist by trade, and nor was I ever too terribly interested in it, but until I started hiking and in this area and listening to people talk about what the sheet of ice did to it. It's a pretty fascinating story, and one that you don't have to be a geologist to appreciate either.
Yeah, I watched a documentary a few weeks ago about the formation of the North American continent. In your area there, some of the more ancient parts of the continent stick out of the ground in different places there, and it's lots of volcanic action that was actually happening as the continent was forming. So we're talking about billions of years ago. It's a nutty thing to think about, but then you have all the glacial action and the sediments on top of it. It's got to be fascinating.
It is. You mentioned basalt, and we had a trail construction project near the Twin Cities where, we were working with giant sheets of basalt and chunks of basalt to craft stone steps and other structures. And yeah, that just is really hard to believe in this area, thinking about volcanoes. But sure enough, they were here at one point. Just really highlights how insignificant we are in a lot of ways, in this brief moment of time we have here.
Yeah, just a blip on the radar. Well,
right.
We covered the geology. How about the geography? From where to where? Describe for us the route this trail takes.
Yeah, so people oftentimes when they talk about Wisconsin, they hold up their hand. It's like the left hand, the mitten on the left hand. Michigan might be the right hand, but we're that left hand. So if your thumb is the Door County Peninsula, the trail, one of the eastern terminus is at the tip of that Door County Peninsula, a little shy of the tip, but right near there. And it heads south, paralleling Lake Michigan for quite a few miles till it gets to about Milwaukee, just north of the Illinois border, and then it swings west towards the center of the state. And at that point, it starts curving back north around Madison. There is a bifurcation in the middle. The western edge of that bifurcation goes into the Driftless area and takes in Aldo Leopold's shack. If you're familiar with Sand County Almanac, that was Aldo Leopold wrote that book, and it talks about land conservation. Certainly a great in that regard. The eastern bifurcation goes through what was the boyhood home of John Muir. So when John Muir first came to the States, he landed in little old Marquette, Wisconsin, and we were just able last year to successfully acquire his boyhood home, or a portion of his boyhood home. So we have the barn walls where John Muir grew up, protected on, very close to the trail, and users can go visit that. And then the bifurcation reconnects just north, sort of in the central part of the state, and the trail continues on, heading in a straight northerly direction, and for a little ways till I would say it's about 200-300 miles of north of that point, and then it heads almost due west and ends up on the Wisconsin-Minnesota border, about an hour northeast of the Twin Cities.
Wow, that's cool. You get a pretty good tour of the state.
Yeah, you do. You go through 31 different counties, and that north and south aspect really bring in the different ecosystems that the trail travels from. Lake, the shores of Lake Michigan to the prairies, to the central sands of the state, where at one point it was a giant glacial lake, and then through the deep woods of the north. So yeah, good diversity for sure.
Very, very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the flora and fauna. So what kind of plant life? I mean, are you in the forest? Or are you going through the prairie? What can someone expect?
Yes, you go through both of them. As the trail kind of parallels Lake Michigan, I think right out of the gate, what you're struck with is the lake is creating these dunes on the shore. There's only about a mile where you're actually dipping your toes in Lake Michigan of the entire route, but you're inland far enough that you can see that repeated wave action that created the dunes from many, many years. And while it goes through that stretch, you certainly get the cool breezes associated with the lake. But then it starts sort of veering a little west of the lake, and you start getting into big oak savannas. So, we're talking about ancient oak trees that are just towering and spreading out, and beneath them grow these really nice prairies. So prairie species like little blue stem, big blue stem, prairie drop seed, those are all grasses. And then you start getting some of your more exotic flowers that are part of the prairie ecosystem. And that really continues across the southern horseshoe, if you will, of the trail. And then as you start getting north, or going north, you start traveling more into these areas of pines, and the prairies are certainly mitigated, and you start getting more forest and deeper forest, and then next thing you know, you're smack dab in the middle of deep hemlock and beautiful maple forest. Maple, certainly in the fall, it's pretty stunning. The whole woods are on fire. It looks like from the, not literally, but it looks like from the leaves, the way they're all changing, and then across the north, that theme continues for quite a ways. You are definitely socked into the woods across the northern tier, and in the southern portion, you get more of that open area. But and climate scientists have the Curtis tension zone that they use to sort of judge where and how the climate is changing, and the Ice Age Trail traverses both sides of that Curtis tension zone. So as that zone moves northward with climate change, then we see our species also, land species, plant species also migrating. So we're seeing increased invasive species in the northern part of the state where we didn't have them before, and it's due partially to that shift of the Curtis tension zone moving northward. So yeah, it has a lot of diversity in terms of what you can experience while you're out there.
By now, you certainly know who Bent Gate is. That's for a great reason. Bent Gate Mountaineering has been sponsoring the Adventure Sports Podcast almost from the beginning, and we really appreciate that. They've made it possible for all the great shows to continue coming your way. We want to say thanks by reminding you to go to them for your backcountry gear. If you live in Colorado, then just stop by their store in Golden. If not, go to bentgate.com. They have what you need, from the latest ultralight gear to the tried and true classics for climbing, hiking, and camping, like Arc'teryx, Hilleberg, Nemo, Western Mountaineering, and many more. Need advice? They have you covered there too. Their staff are passionate adventurers who can offer help from their own experiences. Bentgate also hosts lots of events and speakers. Check out their website to see the schedule and to see all of their products. Help take care of the Adventure Sports Podcast by getting your gear from Bentgate Mountaineering. In talking to through hikers that have hiked, the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, things like that, it's interesting. Mm-hmm. Everybody has their favorite part, and it's based on, some people say, I just love to walk under the canopy of the giant trees, and others, it's like, well, I like it when it opens up and I can see the views. And,
yeah.
So what's cool about what you're describing is that this has it all.
Yeah.
You're not going to get stuck in one versus the other.
No, it changes. Yeah, it shifts on you, and I think that you also have, the other shift is that proximity to these urban centers, and then all of a sudden they're like gone. They're not anywhere near you, and that changes, and it's reflected in the landscape and through the flora and fauna. It's pretty dramatic shifts.
What I'm thinking in my mind here is that we have a lot of listeners who hear people come on our show and talk about their through hike of name the trail, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it's like, oh, you mean I've got to take an extended leave of absence from work? I'm going to have to somehow manage a 3,000-mile trek, and I don't know if I'm really up for that, but it sounds exciting. I'd like to try something. What I'm getting the impression of is that this one's a little shorter. It's a third the distance of the big three, let's say. Right. But it goes through so much diversity, and people can enjoy solitude even more on this trail. I'm beginning to think this might be a great starting place for someone who says, I want to get into through hiking, I just don't have the time or not quite ready to do one of the big three yet.
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely it is more manageable. It takes, depending, everybody hikes their own hike, right? But I would say that, 20 miles a day, working up to that for a beginning backpacker, is no problem. I take youth groups out on the trail all the time for backpacking adventures, and we usually finish with like a 13 or 14 mile day, and they feel like they conquered the world. So an adult with any sort of backpacking experience can certainly cover quite a bit more distance, but it is a good place to sort of get those backpacking chops. But I think the other thing that we've been seeing lately is we're getting more experienced backpackers. We're getting the people that have done, the Triple Crown, people that have done one of them or have done some of the longer trails, and they're thinking like, I just want a place where I can get away from the groups of people.
Yeah.
Where I can go out and I can knock this one off easy, put another, if they're after the feather in their cap, but some just want to get out and walk and not be surrounded, or, wait 15 minutes and someone else will be coming by. They really like that idea of, wait 15 days and someone might come by.
So there is that to consider.
Yeah, there is that. Yes.
A friend and I were laughing because his wife, when he first took her camping, she says, well, there's not even anyone close enough to hear us scream.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's what I want. Right.
Right.
So why are you screaming?
Right.
But I guess the point of all of that is that they're two perspectives. Some people like the community aspect. Other people want the solitude. But it sounds like on this trail, you're going to have to be pretty self-sufficient because you might go days without seeing someone else.
Yeah, I think I'd say that I recommend that to people because I don't want them to be caught off guard. I don't want them to come out and think there is this strong social network on the trail. We have a very passionate group of volunteers that are out working to support and help hikers. Any of them will provide a shuttle or pick you up or give you a hand if you need it, but you really can choose to be locked away, on your own by yourself out there. And not running into people on a regular basis if that's what you want. So, you can design your hike however you want. We have a system of people, like I said, that love helping and supporting hikers and backpackers, but they're just as happy to leave you be too and let you have your own experience.
Oh, what a neat thing. So, what about route finding on the trail? And I bring this up because some people say I've heard about the Continental Divide Trail. One of the thru hikers says, I doubt that any of us that have thru hiked the Continental Divide Trail actually ever walked the same route. Because it's kind of wild and free. You got to do some route finding. There's some places where it's like, well, I got to connect over there and I'm not sure how to get there from here. But what about this trail? Is it one that's pretty obvious?
Yeah, and I would say that that's been a big difference, and I think a reason for an uptick in the number of people that are thru hiking the trail. But yeah, it's usually really well signed. Like I say, we've got plenty of volunteers that, while they may not be able to craft, rock walls and retaining walls, they can certainly go out and make sure that those blazes are kept up, and so it's you follow that yellow blaze. Until you run out of them, and it's pretty well signed. Certainly like anywhere, there are always things that come up, whether it be a high wind event or something like that limits it. But we have a trail conditions section on our website, iceagetrail.org, that helps people with that route finding. We also have an app out, so if people aren't old fashioned like me and like to use those paper maps, that they can use their smartphone and use that to sort of guide their hike. So a lot of different ways to access it, but yeah, in general, the route's pretty easy to follow.
Well, that's cool. That helps. It helps me to think if I didn't have a lot of experience backpacking, it helps me to think that, okay, here's a trail I really can follow. I shouldn't get too lost if I keep my eyes up. Right?
Yep. Just, keep your head on a swivel.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you thru hiked the trail all the way back in 2003. And were you
Correct.
the 11th person? Is that right?
I was the 11th 1,000-miler. So person to hike all 1,000+ miles of the trail. Yep, I was the 11th.
That's wild, and that's fairly recent, 2003, 11. But then you said at the beginning of the show, 150 people have done it now.
Yep. Yeah. So from 1958, when our organization was created, to 2003, there were 11. And 2003 to 2017, we've just gone over 150,000 milers, and so I think that speaks to the quality of the trail that we're putting out. I think it speaks to our guidebooks and our atlas packs that people are able to access, but just our overall awareness building of what this trail is. But I also think there's a national sort of feeling of people saying, I want to just go out and hike. I got to disconnect and get on the land. And I think that's, we're benefiting from that certainly. But there's not a lot of folks who've done it yet.
That makes it even more fun in my book. It's a little bit more original that way. So what is your favorite part of the trail?
Oh man, that's like the worst question in the world. It's tough to say. It's really tough to say. I'll go ahead and pull out a place called the Chequamegon-Nicolet, the Jerry Lake segment of the trail. It's home to where one of the first wolf packs to reintroduce themselves naturally to the state of Wisconsin was located, and I'm a fan of the hemlocks and those deep hemlock woods. So yeah, I think across the north through the Jerry Lake segment is one of my favorites, and it doesn't hurt that there's a place up there called the Mondo Dam Lodge that has ice cream and beer. So that always helps on a long hike, a little place to dip your feet and enjoy some of the finer moments in life.
Oh yeah. We started talking about the fauna and we talked about the flora. We never got to the fauna. You just mentioned the wolves. We've got to go there. So what kind of animals would you expect to encounter?
It's interesting because most of Wisconsin is hunted, and the deer gun season here is like a state holiday. So we definitely don't recommend being on the trail during deer gun season. But lots of whitetail deer, and the classic northern wood species, lots of black bear. There's a report out today actually just talking about the density of black bears across the northern part of the state, and how that's increasing dramatically. We have wolves have been naturally reintroduced themselves, wild turkeys, porcupines, all sorts of animals in the weasel family. The list goes on and on. So, but no grizzly bears, or any of those desert species. But that's it's a pretty good spread, and it also depends on where you are in the state. The sandhill cranes in the southern marshes and prairie areas. But it's a good mix, like the trail itself.
Luke, I'll bet you knew this already, but sandhill cranes were indigenous with some of the dinosaurs.
Yes.
And so
that's why they sound like dinosaurs when they're flying overhead. Yeah.
It's kind of fun to talk about an ice age trail, and we're talking about an ice age that happened a long time after the dinosaurs, but the cranes were here millions of years before that. This is some really ancient history.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, they are prehistoric sounding. I mean, when I first heard them, I was in Wisconsin, and they've had a really huge comeback since then. But I remember thinking to myself, like, what is that? I've never heard that before. So yeah, it's definitely a cool thing to hear.
Well, what about wolves? I mean, I think it would be such a thrill to get to hear them in the night. It would just be delightful. But most of the United States doesn't have a wolf population. People aren't really familiar with wolves. Coyotes, yeah, a little bit more, but not wolves. So there are all sorts of stories out there. Hollywood does a good job of trying to misrepresent animals. So how should we encounter a wolf? I mean, what's the story there?
So in areas at our trailheads, we'll have postings if it's if you're in wolf habitat. With some, here's some things to think about. Oftentimes you will never see them, and you're lucky to hear them. But what we do tell people, specifically if they're hiking with a dog, to keep them, on leash. Pack animals like a wolf. Wolves will attack a dog in their territory. The way that I sort of judge where I am in relationship to wolves is I look in the area, certainly like northern part of the state, but But if I'm coming into a hiking area where you start getting sort of like this sedge or, low grass with very open understory, that's oftentimes where you will find wolves raising their young. And so that's where, when we have sections of trail that go across areas like that, that's when we'll post information like, keep your dog on your leash. You are entering wolf territory and known breeding grounds. But you hear stories from people that want to hunt wolves, that they see them all the time. But we don't. I have yet to have a definitely confirmed sighting. I think I've seen one twice. But I'm just not 100% there to say, yes, it was a wolf. But, they are out there, and people do report seeing them and hearing them, certainly. So you just got to be safe and know where you are in your surroundings, and always think about it, that, they're out there somewhere. So, be careful.
Yeah, I think that hikers are more familiar with what to do about bears, right? Because
sure. Yeah.
Especially black bears. I mean, they're everywhere.
Right.
Are there any special recommendations with wolves?
No, I mean, we don't have, because they're so elusive, because they tend to not make themselves known. There aren't a lot of considerations there. There have been documented cases where they have gone near humans or gone after humans. Usually they are the ones who are hunting with dogs. And so, we say be really alert and stay on edge, but we haven't really had a situation where we've had to, put out a statement or say anything. We've never had a hiker that we know of ever approached by wolves. So, I think it's best just to leave them alone. And no, I mean, we encourage hanging your food across the north, but mainly because of the bears, the bear population. But yeah, there's not a lot that we put out in terms of, watch out for this, other than trailhead markers.
Right. Well, I think personally that I would count myself blessed if I had an opportunity to hear a wolf, much less see one. I think it would be so neat.
Oh yeah. The two that I think I might have seen were fleeting, running across a road, driving. Another one was, waking up and looking out across the lake and seeing it scamper across the edge until it caught wind or sight of me. But I always feel lucky just to think that it possibly could have been. It's such a magical creature, and certainly a long history, and it has been overly demonized, but I consider myself lucky as well.
Very, very cool. So what is the best season for doing a thru hike on the Ice Age Trail?
Yeah, I always recommend in the fall. Anytime that, if you can finish it before deer hunting season starts, which is typically the weekend before Thanksgiving, anytime moving backwards from there is a good time. The early spring, we have a lot of bugs, a lot of mosquitoes, as you can imagine, with thousands of lakes across the north. We have lots of bugs and ticks, and we are in the Lyme disease area, so we encourage strong tick prevention. But I think, in a midsummer to later summer, all those things die back. I just returned from a trip up north yesterday, and didn't wear bug dope once. So now to November is a really good time, and if you can catch the fall color in Wisconsin while you're on the trail, that's a really, really special time, because those maple forests across the north really just light up, and just oranges and reds like you have never seen unless you're in another place where there's a maple forest. But really, really fantastic walking. And then the other, the understory starts sort of dying back, so you can get a longer view as opposed to being in that, quote unquote green tunnel. You really get a chance to start seeing the geology. Recently Mike Summers completed a winter thru hike, and the views of the landscape that he had were pretty tremendous, because in the wintertime you can see those moraines a little more detail, or those eskers or kettles or kames. You can really get a good picture of what the last glacial advance did to the land.
It's more of a late summer, fall season then.
I think so. I think that'd be, if I did it again, that's when it would be, that or the winter time. But yeah, definitely a late fall would be prime.
Hey guys, Travis here. We've had some listeners write in to ask about ways that they can help support the Adventure Sports Podcast, so we wanted to let you guys know that we've just launched our new Patreon page, so go check it out. It's over at patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. We've built a few patron levels in there with varying benefits. We want to keep bringing you your adventure inspiration twice a week, but we do need help to keep the show going. So head on over to Patreon and consider supporting what we produce. Thanks for listening, guys. The 180 Flame is the ideal alternative to bulky and fragile gas-burning camp stoves. The 180 Flame utilizes fewer parts with minimal weight and maximized reliability. The locking tab and slot design means there are no hinges, welds, or rivets to fail you in the field. Cook your food and boil water quickly using only small amounts of natural fuels including twigs, grass, pine cones, and leaves. Weighing just 6.4 ounces, the 180 Flame is the ideal alternative to a backpacking stove. You can find your new flame at 180tac.com or a retailer near you. 180 Flame. Think big, pack small.
You mentioned ticks. I have to get a little perspective here.
Sure.
Ticks are just about everywhere across the United States. Obviously, where it's warmer and wetter, there are more of them. And Wisconsin gets pretty cold in the wintertime, so I can't imagine the tick population is too fierce.
You might be surprised by that. I mean, it's not. I don't know how it compares to other places in the state, but for example, when I did my thru hike, it was in June and July, and there were moments where I would stop and literally brush them off my gaiters, with my hands, like not just one but multiple ticks climbing up my legs, and they can be pretty bad. So I always mention that especially with Lyme disease and the prevalence of Lyme disease in our area, as a cautionary tale for people. Bring your bug dope, tuck your socks in, or tuck your pants into your socks, whatever you need to do, and check regularly because they can spread quite a bit.
Okay, so that's good to know. Something to plan for and watch for, but it's not as much of a factor later in the summer and into the fall.
For sure, yeah, no,
and
definitely.
Then I don't think Mike would have had any issues with his winter hike.
Not one. No. I'd be surprised if he had a tick. Yeah.
So just for a quick overview, a winter hike. So Mike was the first one to do it, I guess.
Yep. First person to complete a thru hike of the Ice Age Trail in the winter.
What kind of weather are we talking about if people wanted to get into the winter season?
Well, it really depends on the season, but no, you can expect below zero for multiple days on end, everything from ice to really, really deep snow. I've been in the Northwoods with a couple feet of snow on the ground and more coming down. And anywhere in the state is subject to that sort of environment. I mean, there have been milder winters, but any winter in Wisconsin can be pretty frigid. So it's a tough road to hoe when you get out there in the wintertime. But again, I think the reward there is just the increased view and a whole new perspective, of what it is to hike and winter backpacking on the trail. On the Ice Age Trail is one of my favorite times to go out because of those long views, and it's really just changes the whole look of the woods, and it's dramatically quieter, and just a blanket of white really adjusts the lens that you're looking through.
We recently interviewed one of the two fellows that did a winter thru hike of the Pacific Crest Trail, and that was the first. They were disappointed because they wanted to ski more than they could. They ended up having to hike more of it and ski less of it. How much cross-country skiing would one expect if you tried to do a winter thru hike of the Ice Age Trail?
Boy, I think you could do quite a bit of it. And again, it depends on the true part of the winter where you are. But I cross country ski it, and I use the shorter skis with metal edges, and it's the backcountry ski, and it's a trick in spots, but I think it's definitely doable. I would strongly consider taking skis if I did a winter long distance hike on it and pulling a sled, just because I think it would be a really good way to go if there was enough snow cover. But no, you can certainly pull it off.
Hmm. And speaking of ways to do the trail, what are the modes of travel that are allowed? Can you mountain bike it?
Nope, it's foot travel only, designated by the National Park Service as such. So yeah, if you can use your feet to do it, have at it. No biking, but snowshoeing, skiing, running, hiking, all of those are certainly allowable.
What about livestock?
No livestock. No pack animals.
Okay, so no pack animals, no mountain bikes, but you can ski it, you can hike it, you can run it. Probably you can skate parts of it in the wintertime.
You probably could. Yeah, you can snowshoe it. Yeah, you can sled it. You can do a lot of different things.
Very, very cool. Well, how about this? How about you give us a recommendation? If somebody says, you know what, I am going to go do that trail, how do they get started? What do they need to do to prepare for it? And that sort of thing.
Sure. There are a couple different ways. If calling our office, or emailing anyone on our team here, iceagetrail.org. Go to our website. You can find all of our contact information. That's a really good way to figure out what we recommend, especially if you're coming from out of state. So I think that's a good step. If you don't want to talk to anyone at our team, then I would purchase a copy of the Ice Age Trail Guidebook or Atlas. There are two different documents or two different books that we put out that really give it a step-by-step description of the trail. And then there's also the app Mammoth Tracks that's put out by Gut Hooks that is really good for people that like to use their phone when they walk. So any of those sorts of research pieces I think are helpful to begin with, and certainly calling. But if someone wants to come in and just do, say, a few days in an area that they know, then I would reach out to our local volunteers. All of their contact information is on our website. And just find out if they had any of those straight line winds or any major events that caused significant damage on the trail, and then hear from them, because they're the ones who are spending day after day on that section of trail.
That sounds really, really cool. So you mentioned the website. What is the website URL?
iceagetrail.org.
And I accidentally typed iceagetrail.com, and then it did reroute me. So.
Oh, did cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, iceagetrail.org. This is kind of an off-the-wall question, but why do this trail instead of one of the big three, say? Why would you say that this, if you want this is the trail for you?
I think, well, you touched on a couple things. It's not quite as long if you're looking for something that, kind of gets you out over the course of, say, 40, 50 days or so. But the other thing for me is two things: the diversity of the trail, the route that it takes in from the prairies and the lake shore to the woods of the north, and then just the time to be alone. Really is a chance to be alone if that's what you want, and if you don't want to be alone, if you want to walk into any of the number of establishments in Wisconsin, the people are really friendly. When I did my thru hike, it was to get away from people, and it turned out that what was probably one of the highlights of me was restoration and faith of the human species, and feeling like, wow, there really are great people, and a lot of them happen to be in Wisconsin. So I feel pretty strongly about that opportunity to get away, but also the support network that rests underneath is always there.
Oh, that's cool. I was just getting ready to ask about the logistics. This sounds to me like this is a 6 to 8 week trail for most people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's long enough. You're not going to carry your food for the whole distance, right? So you're going to have resupply points. Are they readily available? Is it really easily doable, or does it take a little bit more planning?
Well, I didn't use a bounce box or anything when I went, and I got a piece of advice from Sharon Jingle, who was a triple crowner and who hiked the Ice Age Trail, I think a year or two before me. And she said, if you can eat out of a gas station, you can through hike the Ice Age Trail. So that's the advice I give to folks. And I went cold on my hike because there were opportunities to stop and have that warm meal every so often, or enough that I felt comfortable with. So I think there are certainly enough post office along the way if you wanted to do bounce boxes, you could, but I think that you can resupply in small little mom and pop shops and gas stations and whatnot along the way if you need to.
Wow, it just sounds like the perfect place if someone wanted to do a shorter through hike and do something that's a little less done. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
How can people help out? So you've got this alliance, the Ice Age Trail Alliance, that helps to care for the trail. It's in partnership with some other organizations that work to create and preserve the trail, but I'm sure that there are volunteer opportunities. What can people do if they want to be a part of the fun?
Oh, absolutely. No, that's we are a volunteer-based organization, and that's something that we take great pride in. And so we have 20 volunteer chapters across the state, and these are usually by county. And so we've got the local folks that are meeting on a regular basis, planning hikes, planning work days, and trying to take care of their little section of the trail or their portion of the trail that they value. But in terms of like coming from out of state, we also have a program called the Mobile Skills Crew. And this is the trail building arm of the organization, if you will, where we'll go to a lot of times the places where the local volunteers don't have the capacity to take on a bigger scale project. And so, we'll take our 3 or 4 trailers up there with our full camp kitchen. We provide a place to camp. We provide all your meals. And you got to go out in the field with dedicated crew leaders and highly trained crew leaders that guide you in the work of everything from, just cutting basic trail to creating a clear span bridge and everything in between. So you mentioned partners. We work with a lot of partners to get that work done, from the National Park Service to the Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, local Wisconsin DNR, and all sorts of other like-minded organizations that come out and help us take care of this. This trail that 1.26 million people use every year. There's a lot of value for those people that use it every day in their daily routine. So get a lot of support, and I would recommend joining any local organization or a local chapter or the Mobile Skills Crew for volunteer opportunities.
So if someone wanted to do this Mobile Skills Crew, what size is the crew?
Oh, well, we've had as many as 350 people on a trail construction project. 356, I think, if I remember correctly, was the high mark. To at some point, sometimes we'll have 40 or so folks out, working on the trail in different spots.
What's the time commitment for that?
Oh, take you for as long as you want to join us. The projects typically run about 4 days or so. Depends on the project, the site, and a lot of other logistics. But we have people that show up for a day to the full time and join us. So like I said, there's free food, free place to camp, and you've got someone who can help you with the art and science of trail building when you're out there.
All right. So people could get more information about that, I'll bet, from the website as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, go to go to the website, and then under About the IATA, there's a click or a link to the Mobile Skills Crew and also our volunteer chapters.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to shoot from the hip on this one. For our last question, will you kind of close out the show by just sharing a story about a really wonderful experience that you had on this trail?
Oh, yeah, man. There's a lot of them. That's tough. But I always go back to a really changing moment for me on my through hike. And I was sort of chasing this ghost the whole way. This guy was hiking ahead of me. You may have heard of him, Clint Bunting, trail name Lint, who's gone on to become a triple crowner and just a beast of a hiker. But he was about always he started a month before me, and he was ahead of me on the trail. And, we had a communication network back and forth, but, reconnecting with him on the trail was always afterwards. It was something that was a fond memory for me. But he had warned me about the north through our communication channels, and he told me about Langlade County, one of the counties, and how it feeds into Lincoln County, another challenging stretch, and a spot in between the two of Lincoln and then the next county, Taylor, that was pretty tough. And so I hiked through with this sort of thought in mind that this is going to be challenging, and I remember getting to this point on the trail where I stopped and on the side of the road, and this old pickup truck pulled up on the side of the road, and this gentleman got out, an older guy got out, and he left the car door open and on his pickup, and he came down and he sat down next to me, and for about an hour we talked about everything that you shouldn't talk about with strangers, from politics and religion and everything that you're not supposed to mention, and I'm not sure why I connected so strongly with him, but when he left, I just had a complete and total meltdown, broke down entirely. And that's when I think I sort of purged all of this, these expectations of myself and this, these things that I was feeling like I should be doing and had to be doing. And that's when it really became real for me, just to hike my own hike and really just get in touch with what I needed in the world. And I realized that all the complaints and things that I was running from were just a result of me being a big baby, and I was pretty insignificant, and with insignificant comes just unlimited freedom when you don't have to worry so much about what you think about things, and it doesn't really matter in the big scale. And I think glacial time has a way of highlighting that, and so that was a sort of that cumulative effect of hiking within those parameters, and how it just sort of all melted away. And that's the one that sticks with me the strongest.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I have tried to share with our listeners, and our various guests have, about how when you do an adventure sport, when you do a thru hike, when you do something like this, how it can impact you in such positive ways. Mm-hmm. And we've had a lot of our guests who talk about how this was the demon that they overcame, or this is the insight that they got, or this is how it changed their lives. But what you just said, I think, was so well put. I encourage our listeners, rewind about 30 seconds, listen to that one again, because that was really well said. And I think that's really what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
thanks
you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, and also, thank you for being on the show today. I loved hearing about the Ice Age Trail. It sounds like a fascinating trail to hike. Really, really cool. Listeners, go on our website, leave some comments, let us know what you know about it, hook up about this. Maybe we can get more people on the trail experiencing it who can help to support the trail as well through volunteer opportunities and all that sort of thing. I'm really glad to know about the trail. Sounds like a wonderful option for thru hikers, for people that want to take an extended vacation, or people that might want to do a shorter vacation and just enjoy a part of the country that a lot of people don't know as much about. So, Luke, thank you very much.
Thank you, Curt. It's my pleasure. Good talking with you today.
Yep. You bet. And for all of our listeners out there, you know what I'm going to say. Until the next show, get out there, have some fun.
Hey guys, summer is almost over, and Curt and I have not taken a much-needed break, so we are going to do that next week. Next week we will run a couple of our favorite episodes while we do take a break. So sit back, relax, and enjoy those. If you really find yourself missing us, feel free to visit our new Patreon page at patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast and consider being a sponsor. We really, really would appreciate that. But we'll be back with episode 300 after our break, and until then, get out and have some fun.